Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time. Way back. We're going to a world without sterile clinics, without pain medication, and definitely without WebMD to tell you that your mild headache is probably a terminal disease. Instead, we're journeying into the strange, bewildering, and sometimes downright bizarre world of medieval medicine. This is a time when your doctor's best advice might genuinely be to pray a little harder. Maybe rub a live chicken on your sores. Or if you're really lucky, drink a potion made from ground-up Egyptian mummies. Seriously. You might feel a little grateful for your modern-day ibuprofen by the end of this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice when you wake up isn't the weak morning light filtering through the small, unglazed window of your cottage. It isn't the familiar smell of wood smoke and damp earth. It's a dull, heavy ache behind your eyes, and a strange, sluggish feeling in your limbs. You feel both unbalanced, and in your world, that's not just a feeling, it's a diagnosis. You sit up on your straw-stuffed mattress, the rough wall of your blankets crunching against your skin. You feel too warm, but your skin is clammy. There's a cough rattling in your chest, a dry, unproductive thing. This isn't just a common cold. In the framework of your entire existence, this is a sign of a fundamental imbalance within the very core of your being. You, my friend, are suffering from an excess of a humor. This is the cornerstone of all medical understanding. An elegant and ancient theory passed down from the Greeks, specifically Hippocrates and later the Roman physician Galen. Their ideas have dominated the medical world for over 1,000 years. The theory is simple, really. Your body is a microcosm of the universe, composed of four essential fluids, or humors, each linked to an element and a season. There's blood, associated with air, spring, and a warm, moist quality. It's what makes people cheerful, optimistic, or sanguine. Then there's phlegm, linked to water, winter, and a cold, moist nature. An excess of it makes you slow, apathetic, or phlegmatic. Yellow bile corresponds to fire. Summer, and is hot and dry, it's the source of ambition and anger, making you choleric. And finally, there's black bile, tied to the earth, autumn, and a cold, dry quality. This is the humor of introspection and sadness, the cause of what they call melancholy. A healthy person is one in whom these four humors are in perfect, harmonious balance. Your current state, the fever, the cough, the general malaise, is a clear sign that one of your humors has gone rogue. It has become excessive, corrupt, or is simply in the wrong part of your body. Maybe you have too much hot, wet blood, causing this fever. Or perhaps it's an overabundance of cold, moist phlegm clogging up your lungs. You drag yourself out of bed. The cure isn't to kill a virus or fight a bacteria, those concepts are centuries away. The cure is to restore your personal, internal equilibrium. Everything you do from this moment forward will be aimed at that single goal. The food you eat, the air you breathe, the activities you undertake, and, most importantly, the treatments you will seek, are all designed to either expel the excess humor or to strengthen its opposite. If you're too hot and dry, you'll need things that are cold and wet. It's a beautifully logical system, in its own way. But how to know for sure which humor is the culprit while you have your suspicions? You're just a common person. You'll need an expert, a physician, and that, as you'll soon discover, is a journey in itself. Historians still debate just how deeply this complex humoral theory was understood by the average person versus the university-trained elite. Did you, a humble farmer or artisan, truly think in terms of black bile and phlegm? Or did you just know you were sick and the doctor's explanation sounded fancy and convincing? It's likely a mix of both. The simplified folk version of the grand medical theory. What you do know, with absolute certainty, is that your body's fluids are out of whack, and something needs to be done before they get even further out of balance and threaten your very life. You pull on your tunic, the rough fabric a constant reminder of your discomfort, and prepare to seek help. Your first step is not towards a medicine cabinet, but towards finding someone who can read the secrets your body is telling. So, the decision is made. You need a proper physician. But finding one isn't as simple as looking up a name in a directory. In your world, there's a strict hierarchy of medical practitioners, and the person you're seeking is at the very top of that pyramid. You're not looking for the local village healer with her poultices and folk remedies, nor the multitasking barber-surgeon who can give you a shave and amputate a leg in the same afternoon. No, you're looking for a physicus, a university-trained doctor, a man who has studied the ancient texts of Galen and Avicenna, who can read Latin, and who understands the cosmic dance between the humors and the heavens. And let me tell you, this kind of expertise does not come cheap. This is a consultation that could cost you the equivalent of several months' wages. You're likely a well-to-do merchant or a member of a guild, maybe minor nobility, to even be considering this. A common field worker would simply not have this option. They'd be relying on prayer, a local cunning woman, or just toughing it out. So you send a servant ahead, an appointment is requested, and a hefty fee is paid up front. When the day comes, you're led not into an examination room, but into a study. The air inside is still and smells richly of old parchment, leather bindings, and a faint, sweetish scent of dried herbs. There are no white coats, no stainless steel instruments, no intimidating examination table. Instead, the room is dominated by a massive wooden desk, and the walls are lined with shelves groaning under the weight of enormous, hand-copied books. You see charts on the wall, but they're not of human anatomy as you might expect. One is a detailed map of the stars and astrological chart. Another is a zodiac man, a figure showing which part of the body is governed by which celestial sign. Behind the desk sits the physician, HES an imposing figure, draped in robes of dark, expensive wool, perhaps with a fur collar, looking more like a wealthy scholar or a judge than a doctor. His hands are soft, his fingernails immaculately clean, and he makes no move to get up or approach you. He simply gestures for you to sit in a chair placed a respectable distance away. He will not be touching you. That is a crucial point to understand. Physical contact is for laborers, for craftsmen, for surgeons. He is a man of intellect, a philosopher of the body. His job is to diagnose and prescribe, not to get his hands dirty with the messy business of blood, pus, and tissue. The consultation begins. He speaks in a calm, measured tone, asking you a series of questions. He doesn't ask where it hurts. Instead, he asks what you've been eating for the past week. Has it been rich meats and red wine? Or simple bread and cheese? He asks about the weather. Has it been unseasonably warm, damp and foggy? He inquires about your daily habits, your work, your sleep, your passions. HES a detective, gathering clues to understand how your personal microcosm has fallen out of sync with the macrocosm of the universe. As you describe your fever and cough, he nods slowly, stroking his beard. Hello, he might murmur, a surfeit of Sanguinity, perhaps exacerbated by the moist spring air. He is already fitting your symptoms into his grand, elegant theory of the humors. Here lies a fascinating point of contention for historians. What did a top-tier physician's examination actually consist of? Some accounts suggest they were almost entirely hands-off, sometimes not even seeing the patient in person. A wealthy lord might just send a detailed letter and the servant carrying a sample will get to the physician's study. The idea of the doctor making a house call and actually laying hands on the patient was, for a physicus, quite rare. Other sources describe a more direct, though still distant, observation of the patient's complexion, breathing, and general disposition. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, varying by the physician's personal style and the patient's status. The one thing he is certainly not going to do is listen to your chest or check your pulse in the way we think of it. While some ancient physicians did write about the pulse, by this period it was often a secondary concern to the grander, more holistic picture. Why listen to the frantic drumming of the heart when you could discern the body's entire state from a single, telling sample? After a long series of questions, after considering the season, your diet, and perhaps even the alignment of the planets on the day you fell ill, the physician finally leans forward. He has formed his hypothesis, but he needs one final, crucial piece of evidence to confirm it. He doesn't ask you to stick out your tongue. He doesn't look in your ears. He looks at you expectantly and asks for the one thing that will tell him everything he needs to know. The window to your soul, the mirror of your internal state. He asks for your urine. You weren't unprepared. You, or more likely your servant, have brought it with you, a special flask, often made of clear glass, shaped like a bladder, and nestled carefully in a woven wicker basket to protect it. This is the centerpiece of the consultation. Your physician takes the flask, not with his bare hands. Of course, a cloth is used to handle the container respectfully. He holds it up to the light filtering through the window, his expression one of deep, scholarly concentration. This practice, known as uroscopy, is not just a part of the diagnosis, it is the absolute pinnacle of medieval diagnostic science. HES not just checking for color. Oh no, this is an art form. He swirls the liquid gently, observing its viscosity. Is it thick and syrupy, or thin and watery? He notes the clarity. Is it clear, cloudy, or filled with strange sediment? He might even let it sit for a while, to see how the contents separate into different layers, each one believed to correspond to a different region of the body. The most important tool he has for this part of the examination is his chart. You see him consult a circular diagram, a urine wheel. This chart, a common sight in any physician's study, is a marvel of medieval information design. It typically displayed up to 20 different colors of urine, arranged in a circle like a painter's palette. Each color, from a pale, whitish cyanide color to a deep, ominous black niger, was associated with a specific imbalance of the humors and the prognosis. A healthy, well-tempered person would produce a light, golden straw color with a small cloud of sediment at the bottom. Yours, you suspect, is not that. He holds your flask against the chart, squinting to get a perfect match. Sub Rufus, he might declare, I reddish you. This is a clear sign of too much blood or yellow bile and excess of heat in the body. The diagnosis is firming up. But the sensory examination is not over. Next, he unstoppers the flask and takes a delicate, considered sniff. HES not just checking if it smells bad, HES analyzing the aroma. Does it have a sweet smell? The pungent one? Or a shell, decaying odor rice wheat smell, for instance, could indicate a different kind of internal heat or cooking of the humus. And then comes the part that separates the truly dedicated physician from the rest. The part that might make you a little queasy. He might, just might, dip a finger into the flask and bring it to his lips for a small taste. Yes, you heard that right. He has tasted your pee. For a physician of this era, this was not disgusting, it was data. The taste, be it sweet, bitter, salty, or bland, was the final confirmation. A sweet taste, what we would now recognize as a sign of diabetes, was considered a clue about the state of the patient's internal heat and the health of their liver and kidneys. This entire ritual is so central to medicine that physicians were often depicted in art and satire holding a urine flask, their symbol of office. Much like a king holds a scepter, it was their primary diagnostic tool, more trusted than the patient's own description of their symptoms. And here's a little known, slightly odd fact: the container itself was considered important. Physicians believed that if the urine was carried in an improper flask or was shaken too vigorously on the way, the diagnostic information could be corrupted. There were even treatises written on the proper etiquette of urine transportation. The servant carrying the flask had to walk smoothly and present it to the doctor without jostling its precious contents. Of course, the whole practice was ripe for fraud. Clever patients or their worried families might try to substitute a healthy person's urine, or even animal urine, to get a better diagnosis. There are tales of physicians being tricked, but also of wily doctors who could supposedly spot a fake sample from a mile away. Medical texts from the time are full of warnings about these deceptions. One famous story tells of a doctor who, after being presented with a flask from a noble lady's servant, correctly diagnosed that the sample belonged to a pregnant mare that had been fed too many oats. Whether this is true or a legend meant to bolster the mystique of physicians, we'll never know. Historians still debate the extent to which taste testing was a common practice versus a more specialized or even exaggerated one. Was every doctor doing it, or just a few particularly zealous ones? The texts certainly suggest it was a valid, if not routine, part of the process. After this thorough, multi-sensory inspection of your bodily fluids, the physician sets the flask down. He now has all the information he needs. He knows your diet, the season, the stars, and the intimate secrets revealed by your urine. He clears his throat, his expression grave. He has confirmed his initial suspicion you have an excess of blood, a dangerous heat raging within you. The diagnosis is complete. Now, for the treatment. The physician leans back in his chair, the diagnosis now settled in his mind, but before he can prescribe a single herb or recommend a single procedure, there is one more crucial consultation to be made. It's not with another doctor, nor with a medical text. It's with the heavens. You watch as he turns from his desk and walks over to the large, intricate chart of the cosmos hanging on his wall. Astrology and medicine are not separate disciplines, they are two sides of the same coin. The macrocosm of the heavens directly influences the microcosm of your body. To ignore the stars would be, in his view, an act of sheer medical malpractice. He pulls out a smaller, handheld chart, an ephemeris, which shows the current positions of the planets and stars. He needs to know what the celestial situation is right now, and what it will be in the coming days. Is the moon in a favorable sign? Is Mars, the hot and dry planet, in a position of power that might be contributing to your fever? Is Saturn, cold and dry, aligned in a way that could complicate the treatment? Every planet, every constellation, has its own properties: hot, cold, moist, or dry, just like your humors. A treatment that might be beneficial under the gentle influence of Venus could be disastrous under the aggressive influence of Mars. This is not just some vague, mystical belief. It's a highly systemated and complex field of study. The physician has spent years at university learning the intricate rules of medical astrology. He knows, for example, that you should never, ever perform a procedure on a part of the body when the moon is in the astrological sign that governs it. The zodiac man chart on his wall is his guide for this. It shows a human figure with lines connecting different body parts to signs of the zodiac. Aries rules the head, Taurus the neck, Gemini the arms and shoulders, Cancer the chest, and so on, all the way down to Pisces, which governs the feet. So if a chi is contemplating a treatment for your head, say, for that dull ache behind your eyes, he must first ensure the moon is not in Aries. To do so would be to invite disaster. It would concentrate the moon's dangerous influence on the very area you're trying to heal. He traces the lines on his chart with a finger, muttering calculations under his breath. He's determining the most auspicious moment for your treatment to begin. This could mean waiting for hours, or even days, until the heavens are properly aligned. Your personal health is subject to a cosmic timetable. The level of detail is astonishing. Certain days of the month, known as Egyptian days or dismal days, were considered unlucky for any undertaking, especially medical ones. These were days associated with biblical plagues or other historical disasters. Starting a treatment or taking a new medicine on one of these days was just asking for trouble. There were also critical hours of the day, governed by different planetary influences. Here's a curious tidbit that illustrates the depth of this belief. Some medical manuscripts included lunar calendars for phlebotomy bloodletting. These calendars would tell a practitioner not only which days were good for letting blood, but from which specific vein it should be drawn, all based on the moon's position. Imagine your doctor saying, "Well, I can't treat your cough today. The moon is in Leo. Come back on Thursday after 3 p.m. and we'll drain the vein in your left arm." Not the right one. Mind you, that would be madness. Of course, not everyone was a true believer. There was a long-running and fierce debate, which historians still study, about the exact role of astrology in medicine. Some very devout religious thinkers argued that it was a form of forge and telling that bordered on heresy, a challenge to God's omnipotence. They argued that one should trust in God's will, not the stars. More scientifically minded physicians, even within the Galenic framework, questioned its efficacy, suggesting a greater focus on diet and environment. However, for the majority of mainstream, university-trained physicians, astrology was an indispensable diagnostic and prognostic tool. It was part of the curriculum. To them, ignoring it was like a modern doctor ignoring a patient's blood pressure reading. After several minutes of intense celestial calculation, your physician turns back to you. He has found a window of opportunity. The moon is transitioning out of a troublesome sign, and Venus is in a position of gentle influence. The time to act is soon. He now has the full picture: your humoral imbalance, concerned by your urine, and placed within the context of the cosmic environment. He can finally tell you what must be done to restore your health. And his first, most important prescription, the cornerstone of medieval therapeutic practice, is about to be revealed. He looks at you with an air of absolute authority and tells you that to cure the excess of hot, moist blood that is causing your fever, you must get rid of it. It's time to let some of it out. We must evacuate the offending humor. The physician says, his tone leaving no room for argument. A phlebotomy is required. The word itself sounds technical, important. Phlebotomy, bloodletting. It is the single most common medical procedure of the age. A cure-all for an astonishing range of ailments, from fevers and headaches to melancholy and what we might now call hypertension. The logic, within the humoral framework, is impeccable. If your body is suffering from an excess of a humor in your case, hot, moist blood, the most direct solution is to remove it. You're essentially draining the overflow. But the physician, this man of letters and intellect, won't be performing the procedure himself. Remember, he doesn't do manual labor. He is given the diagnosis and the prescription. The actual work will be done by someone lower down the medical totem pole. He gives you a note, a set of very specific instructions written in Latin. It will detail precisely how much blood is to be taken, and from which location on your body. This isn't a random draining. The choice of vein is critical. Medical texts identified specific veins that were believed to be connected to different organs. For a liver complaint, you might bleed from a vein in the right arm. For a headache, the cephalic vein in the head or arm. For your feverish condition, he likely indicates a major vein in the crook of your elbow, the median cubital vein, which was considered a good, general-purpose site. You take the note and leave the physician's study, your head swimming with cosmic charts and humoral theory. Your next stop is a different kind of establishment, one that smells less of old books and more of soap, hair, and, faintly, of blood. You're going to see a barber-surgeon. These practitioners are the skilled craftsmen of the medical world. They are organized into guilds, just like carpenters or weavers. While the physician has the university knowledge, the barber-surgeon has the hands-on skill with sharp instruments. Their shops are easily identifiable by the iconic polished pyroling red and white staff. The white represents the bandages, and the red represents the blood. Some historians say there was originally a brass bowl at the top, representing the basin used to catch the blood, and the pole itself represented the staff a patient would grip to make their veins bulge. It's a complete, all-in-one advertisement for their bloody business. You enter the shop. It's a bustling place. In one corner, a man is getting a shave. In another, a young boy is grimacing as the barber-surgeon checks his loose tooth, and you're next in line for your phlebotomy. The barber-surgeon, A stout man with rolled-up sleeves and a no-nonsense demeanor reads the physician's note. He nods, understanding the instructions perfectly. He sits you down on a stool and tells you to grip a long, smooth wooden staff. You squeeze it tightly, and he ties a leather tourniquet around your upper arm. The vein on the inside of your elbow pops up, blue and prominent. He then selects his tool. It's a lancet, a small, pointed blade with a sharp edge. He wipes it, probably on a cloth that has been used for other customers today. The concept of sterilization by heat or antiseptics is centuries in the future. Infection is a constant risk, but it's seen as a matter of bad luck, failure, or a poorly constituted body, not invisible germs on the blade. With a quick, practiced flick of the wrist, he nicks the vein. The cut is precise. Blood, dark and warm, begins to well up and trickle down your arm into a brass or pewter bowl he holds underneath. It's a strangely hypnotic sight. You watch the bowl slowly fill. The key question now is how much is enough. The physician's note would have been specific, measured not in milliliters but in ounces. The amount could range from a few ounces for a mild case to a terrifying 20 or 30 ounces, well over half a liter for a severe ailment. Some historical accounts even describe patients being bled until they fainted, which was seen as a sign that the corrupt humor had been fully purged. As the blood flows, you might start to feel lightheaded and dizzy. This is considered a good sign, an indication that the treatment is working. The barber-surgeon watches the flow, the color, and your complexion. When the prescribed amount has been collected in the bowl, he skillfully removes the tourniquet and presses a small pad of linen onto the cut to stop the bleeding, securing it with a bandage. A weirdly fascinating, and still debated, side note is the concept of diversion versus revulsion in bloodletting. If you wanted to draw the bad humors away from an afflicted area, you would bleed from a site far away from it, diversion. But if you wanted to draw the humors out of the afflicted area directly, you would bleed from a site very close to it, revulsion. The physician's choice of bleeding site was based on these complex, and to us, completely bizarre, principles. The academic arguments in medical texts of the period over which vein to use for which ailment were incredibly intense. You stand up, feeling weak and pale, but also strangely cleansed. The fee for the barber-surgeon is much more reasonable than the physician's. You have followed the doctor's orders. You have purged the excess humor. Now, all you can do is go home, rest, and hope that your internal balance has been restored. As you walk home, the world feels a little wobbly, but you have the satisfaction of knowing you have received the very best, most modern medical care your world has to offer. You'll be back at home, resting on your straw mattress, feeling drained and feeble from the bloodletting. The barber-surgeon did his job, but the physician's plan for rebalancing your humors isn't necessarily complete. Fabergé was the hammer of medieval medicine, but sometimes a more delicate touch was required. What if the bad humor wasn't in your blood in general, but was concentrated in a specific, hard-to-reach area? Or what if you were to frail for a full-on venous bloodletting? For this, the physician had another prescription, another living tool in his medical arsenal. He might have recommended the application of leeches. A servant is dispatched not to the barber-surgeon, but perhaps to an apothecary or even a specialized leech collector. These collectors were often poor folk who would wade into marshes and ponds, letting the slimy creatures attached to their own legs and arms to be gathered. It was a miserable, no-status job. The leeches would arrive at your home in a jar of water, dark, wriggling, and frankly, a bit unsettling. Your attendant, perhaps your spouse or a hired nurse, gets to work. The leeches can't just be plopped onto your skin anywhere. They are surprisingly picky eaters. The skin must be cleaned and sometimes sweetened with a bit of milk or sugar to entice them. The target area is chosen with care. If you have a headache, they might be applied to your temples. For a sore liver, on your abdomen over the organ. For your fever and cough, perhaps on your chest. One by one, the leeches are placed on your skin. You feel a small, Sharp pinch as each one latches on with its three-bladed jaw, which contains over 100 tiny teeth. It's a surprisingly painless bite, and for a very good reason, which is the truly brilliant part of this whole procedure. Leech saliva is a complex chemical cocktail, the marvel of natural pharmacology. It contains a powerful anesthetic, which is why the bite doesn't hurt much after the initial prick. More importantly, it contains an anticoagulant called urine. This is the magic ingredient. It prevents the blood from clotting, allowing the leech to feed continuously and ensuring the wound will continue to bleed a little even after the leech has detached. You lie there, still impatient, as these small, living vials slowly fill with your bad blood. A single leech can consume up to 10 times its body weight in blood, swelling from a small, dark worm into a bloated, sausage-like creature. It can take anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour. It's a strange, quiet, and deeply personal procedure. You can feel them, a slight weight on your skin, a bizarre symbiosis taking place in your own bed. This is a much more localized treatment than phlebotomy. The theory was that the leeches would draw out the corrupt humors directly from the afflicted part of the body. They were seen as a gentler, more refined way of bleeding a patient. Here's a curious piece of leech lore. They were, in a sense, reusable. After a leech was full, it would detach on its own. It wouldn't be thrown away, though that would be wasteful. Instead, the leech would be milked of the blood it had consumed, often by rubbing it with salt to make it regurgitate. Then it would be put back in its jar, ready to be used again in a few months after it had recovered its appetite. Whether it was used on the same patient or a new one is a rather unsettling question, and practices likely varied. The idea of cross-contamination was simply not a concern. Historians are still fascinated by the sheer scale of the leech trade in the early 19th century, long after the medieval period but before humoral theory had fully died out. France was importing some 40 million leeches a year for medical purposes. The demand was immense. This wasn't some obscure folk remedy, it was mainstream medicine practiced for centuries. There's a debate among medical historians about whether leeches were seen as a primary treatment or more of a secondary option. Were they a first-line therapy like bloodletting, or were they used more for specific conditions or on patients deemed too weak for the lancet? The evidence suggests they were an integral and frequently used part of the medical toolkit. After what feels like an eternity, the last of the bloated leeches drops off. The attendant cleans the small, Y-shaped wounds, which continue to ooze slightly thanks to the lingering urine. You are, once again, left feeling weaker, but with the assurance that another portion of the corrupt, fever-inducing humor has been skillfully extracted from your body. You've now been bled by steel and by slug. You look at the jar of dark, writhing creatures, and you can't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude. These ugly little worms, in the eyes of your world, are your allies. Your tiny, dedicated doctors, working to restore the precious balance that means the difference between sickness and health. You close your eyes, hoping that this double dose of drainage will finally be enough. Let's say the bloodletting and the leeches haven't quite done the trick. Or perhaps your ailment isn't a fever, but something more solid. A painful lump under your skin, a bladder stone, a cataract, or a wound from an accident that has become badly infected and now the flesh is turning dark. For these problems, the physician will shake his head. This is no longer a matter of internal balance. This is a matter for a craftsman. He will once again refer you downward in the medical hierarchy, past the barber-surgeon who handles routine bleeding, to a full-fledged surgeon. And who is this surgeon? Yes, likely the same person as the barber. The distinction we make today between a barber who cuts hair and a surgeon who cuts bodies was, for a long time, non-existent. The guild of barber-surgeons was a single entity, and their skill set was based on one simple principle: they were good with sharp tools. Your surgeon might have given your neighbor a hair cut and a shave this morning, and this afternoon he'll be setting your broken leg or amputating your gangrenous finger. You find yourself back in his shop, which now feels less like a salon and more like a workshop of the flesh for a serious procedure. He might take you to a back room, or if you're wealthy, he would be summoned to your home. There is no operating theater, no sterile field, no team of nurses. There is the surgeon, probably an apprentice or two to hold you down, and a collection of truly intimidating-looking instruments laid out on a wooden table. You see saws, knives of various shapes and sizes, cauterizing irons heating in a brazier, and heavy-duty forceps. The most important thing missing from this picture: anesthesia. There is no general anesthetic. For the agony that is to come, your options are limited and grim. You might be given a strong wine or a crude distillation of alcohol to drink in large quantities. More likely, you'll be offered a soporific sponge, soaked in a potent cocktail of opium, mandrake, and hemp. Its effectiveness was notoriously unreliable. Most often, the only anesthesia was a leather strap to bite down on in the strong arms of the surgeon's assistants. Let's imagine you have a bladder stone. The surgeon will perform a lithotomy. You be held down, and the surgeon, using a combination of internal probing and external cutting, would make a swift and terrifyingly direct incision to create a path toward the bladder. The entire process is a blur of agony. Speed is the surgeon's greatest ally, his most praised skill. A good surgeon could perform an amputation in under a minute. The longer the procedure takes, the more likely the patient is to die from shock and blood loss. He works with a grim, focused efficiency, tossing, probing, and then, with a pair of forceps, grasping the stone and pulling it free. The ordeal isn't over. The wound is open and bleeding. To stop it, the white-hot iron is pulled from the brazier. The sizzle and the smell are stomach-turning. But cauterization is the go-to method for closing wounds. It's not just to stop the bleeding. It's believed that the searing heat purges the wound of potential corruption and seals it against the bad air that causes disease. Now for the healing, which is its own bizarre science. In the days that follow, you will be watched for a specific sign that things are going well. That sign is the formation of what they call laudable pus. Yes, laudable, as in praiseworthy, according to the mainstream Galenic doctrine. A wound that produces thick, creamy, odorless pus is a healthy wound. It's seen as the body successfully expelling the corrupt humus from the site of the injury. A wound that heals cleanly, without pus, is viewed with suspicion. It's thought that the bad humors have been trapped inside, where they will fester and cause bigger problems later, so your attendants might actually apply irritating poultices to encourage the formation of this good pus. This very issue, however, was a point of fierce contention among medical professionals, a debate that historians find fascinating, while most surgeons followed the laudable pus doctrine. A few radical thinkers, like Theodoric of Lucca in the 13th century, argued for the complete opposite. He insisted that wounds should be kept clean, washed with wine, the alcohol acting as a mild antiseptic, and stitched up to heal without any pus at all. He was, in essence, advocating for antiseptic surgery centuries ahead of his time. His ideas were largely dismissed by the medical establishment of his day as dangerous and contrary to the teachings of Galen. It's a stark reminder that history is never a monolith. There are always dissenting voices, even if they are drowned out by the mainstream. You have survived the knife and the fire. You lie in your bed, weak, in pain, but the stone is gone. Your fate now lies in the hands of your own constitution and the strange, counterintuitive process of medieval healing. Let's rewind a bit. Suppose your ailment isn't a fever or a bladder stone, but something localized in your head. You've been suffering from excruciating, persistent headaches, or perhaps you've been having seizures, what your contemporaries might call the falling sickness. Maybe you've just been acting strangely, prone to fits of melancholy or mania that have your family worried. For these conditions, the physician, after consulting his astrological charts, might recommend a procedure that sounds to our ears like something from a horror film, but was, in its time, a legitimate and surprisingly widespread surgical intervention, trepanation. That's right. They're going to drill a hole in your head. The logic behind it, like so much of medieval medicine, is tied to the humors and a bit of mechanical common sense. The skull is a closed container. If bad humors, or vapors, have risen from the body and become trapped in your head, they create pressure. This pressure is the cause of your pain, your seizures, your madness. The solution: create an escape route. By cutting a hole in the skull, you are quite literally letting the badness out. It's a pressure release valve for the soul. So you find yourself once again in the hands of the barber-surgeon. This is a delicate operation, requiring a steady hand and specialized tools. You are, as with other surgeries, held down firmly. The surgeon takes a sharp knife and makes a circular or cross-shaped incision in your scalp, peeling the skin and flesh back to expose the white, bare bone of your skull. This in itself is an agonizing process. Then, he selects his main instrument. It could be a simple, pointed tool called a barber-surgeon, which he would use to scrape and chip away at the bone, slowly carving out a hole. Or he might use a more advanced tool, a cranial drill that works like a carpenter's brace and bit, allowing him to bore into the skull with more precision and speed. The most sophisticated instrument was the tray-5, a cylindrical saw that could cut a neat, circular plug of bone, a rondelle, right out of your skull. You lie there, conscious, listening to the horrifying grating and scraping sound as the surgeon works on your head. He has to be incredibly careful. His goal is to penetrate the thick bone of the skull but not the delicate membrane beneath it, the dura mater, which protects the brain. A slip of the hand here would be fatal. The surgeon might periodically stop and probe the depth of the cut with a feather or a special tool to gauge his progress. Finally, with a last turn of the drill or a final chip of the burin, HES through, a piece of your skull is removed. In the surgeon's eyes, the malevolent vapors and black bile that have been tormenting you are now free to escape. The pressure is released. The procedure is a success. The surgeon might then cover the hole with a metal plate or simply stitch the scalp back over it, leaving a soft spot where the bone used to be. The most astonishing thing about T-Rapanation isn't that it was done, but that people survived it. Archaeological evidence from all over the world, from prehistoric times through the medieval period, shows skulls with T-Rapanation holes that have smooth, rounded edges. This is a clear sign of bone regrowth, meaning the patient lived for months, or even years, after the surgery. The survival rate was, unbelievably, not zero. A weird and fascinating artifact of this practice is the bone rondelle itself. The circular piece of bone removed from the patient's skull was sometimes kept. It might be worn by the patient as a powerful amulet to ward off future evil spirits or sickness. In some cases, these bone discs were ground into a powder and consumed as a medicine, particularly for treating epilepsy. The logic here is a form of sympathetic magic. A substance taken from the site of the disease holds the power to cure that same disease. You are literally re-ingesting a part of your own cured ailment to prevent its return. The debate among historians and archaeologists on this topic is intense. What was the primary reason for T-Rapanation? Was it always for medical reasons, like epilepsy and skull fractures, or were there ritualistic or spiritual motivations? Some scholars argue that the holes were created to release evil spirits, a form of surgical exorcism. Others maintain it was a pragmatic, if brutal, attempt to solve a perceived physical problem. The truth is likely a combination of both. The line between the medical and the magical was blurry at best. For you, the patient, it doesn't matter if they're releasing a trapped humor or a trapped demon. You just want the pain to stop. As you lie recovering, with a permanent soft spot on your head, you pray that they let the right thing out. Let's imagine you've survived the surgeon's ministrations, but your recovery is slow. The physician, on a follow-up visit or more likely, after reviewing a fresh flask of your urine brought by a servant, decides you need more than just rest. You need medicine, not the dramatic, surgical kind, but the ingestible, alchemical kind. He hands you a prescription, a complex recipe scrawled in Latin, and sends you on your way. Your destination is one of the most mysterious and dramatic shops in any medieval town, the apothecary. As you push open the heavy wooden door, a bell jingles, and you're hit by an overwhelming wave of smells. It's an intoxicating, unsightly, dizzying blend of dried flowers, pungent roots, exotic spices, and something else, something musky and vaguely mineral. The air is thick with the scent of 100 different ingredients, all promising health and healing. The shop is a dimly lit cavern of wonders. The walls are lined from floor to ceiling with wooden shelves, and on those shelves are hundreds of containers. You see earthenware pots, gas jars, carved wooden boxes, and leather pouches, each one meticulously labeled with its contents in elegant script. You might see labels for common herbs like rosemary and lavender or lavender next to more exotic ones like cinnamon or marema, which have traveled thousands of miles along spice routes to reach this small shop. Behind a long wooden counter stands the apothecary. He is a master craftsman, a member of a powerful and respected guild, often linked with the grocers or spice merchants. HES, not just a shopkeeper, HES a skilled compounder. He takes your physician's prescription and reads it with a practiced eye. It's probably not for a single ingredient, but for a complex mixture designed to counteract your specific humoral imbalance. If you're suffering from an excess of heat, the recipe will call for cooling ingredients. If you're too dry, it will require moistening ones. You watch, fascinated, as he gets to work. He moves around his shop with a quiet confidence, taking a pinch of this and a scoop of that from his many jars. He uses a set of delicate bronze scales to weigh each ingredient with precision. The amounts are critical. He might add dried rose petals cold and dry, some licorice root moderately cold and moist, and a pinch of sandalwood cold and dry. These are the active ingredients. But medicine needs a vehicle. The powders are placed into a large mortar, and the apothecary grabs a heavy pestle. He begins to grind, his movements rhythmic and strong. He might add honey or sugar syrup, not just for taste, but because they are considered heating or moistening in their own right and are part of the prescription's balance. The goal is to create a confection or an electuria thick, gooey paste that you would take by the spoonful. Other forms of medicine could be pills, rolled by hand with breadcrumbs or clay, or a liquid decoction, made by boiling the ingredients in wine or water. As you look around the shop, your eyes are drawn to some of the more unusual labels. You see a large jar labeled Draconus sanguis, dragon's blood. Your heart might skip a beat, but it's not what you think. This is the name for the bright red, resinous sap of a specific tree, used as a powerful astringent. You might see a jar of pearls. While wealthy customers might get actual ground pearls considered a powerful cooling agent, for most people, this was a preparation of white, calcified bone or shell. And then you see the truly weird stuff. A box labeled cranium hominis human skull. A pouch of mummy. These are not metaphors. They are some of the most highly prized and most expensive ingredients in the entire shop. These are the ingredients of what's known as corpse medicine, a practice that seems ghoulish to us, but was a legitimate and high status part of European medicine for centuries. The debate among historians here is not if this happened, it absolutely did, but why it was so readily accepted. Why would a society that held the human body as sacred be so willing to consume parts of it as medicine? The theories are complex. Some suggest it evolved from the belief that the remains of holy saints held curative powers, which was then extended to other human remains. Another theory, a form of sympathetic magic, is that consuming a part of a healthy or strong person, say, a gladiator or a young man who died a sudden, violent death, could transfer their vitality to the patient. It's a strange, unsettling corner of medical history where medicine, magic, and a form of ritual cannibalism all seem to overlap. The apothecary finishes his work. He scrapes the thick, dark, fragrant paste from the mortar into a small ceramic pot and hands it to you with instructions. A spoonful every morning. with a little warm wine. You pay him his ingredients, and skill are not cheap, and leave the shop, clutching your pot of custom-made medicine. It smells strange, a mix of sweet and bitter. You don't know every single ingredient that went into it, and perhaps it's better that you don't. You just trust that the physician's knowledge and the apothecary's craft will be enough. You're at home with your pot of expensive, custom-blended medicine from the apothecary. You take a spoonful as prescribed. The taste a strange mix of sweet honey and bitter herbs. But let's say your condition is external. Perhaps you have a persistent skin rash, a festering wound that refuses to heal, or a painful, swollen joint. For this, the physician might have prescribed an ointment or a poultice. And the ingredients for these topical remedies could get even more unconventional than the ones you swallow. Get ready, because we're about to enter the world of scatological medicine. A servant returns from the apothecary, or perhaps from a more humble village healer, with the ingredients for your poultice, laid out in your kitchen, or some herbs, some warm lard or wax to be used as a base, and a small, dried cake of, well, there's no delicate way to put this. It's dung. Yes, animal excrement was a surprisingly common ingredient in the medieval pharmacopoeia. This wasn't some fringe, backwoods practice, it was written down in serious medical texts. The type of animal was very important, as each was believed to have different therapeutic properties based on the animal's diet and humoral nature. The most highly prized was often peacock dung, which was used to treat epilepsy and vertigo. The logic, as strange as it sounds, was that the peacock was a proud, noble bird, and its waste must retain some of its powerful properties. For your skin condition, the prescription might call for fresh, warm cow dung, to be mixed with lard and applied as a soothing poultice. The belief was that the warmth of the dung was inherently healing. For a wound, a poultice of dog excrement, specifically from a dog that had been eating a lot of bones, which made the waste white and powdery when dried, was thought to be a powerful drying and cleansing agent. They called it album Greecum. Pig feces were used to stop nosebleed, and the droppings of mice were sometimes mixed with other ingredients to make a salve for sores. You lie there as a warm, foul-smelling mixture is slathered onto your afflicted limb and wrapped in a linen cloth. The smell is potent. It's the smell of the barnyard, right there in your bed. It's hard to imagine willingly submitting to this, but you must understand the mindset. To you, this isn't just filth. It has been prescribed by a learned man. It is medicine. The natural world, in all its forms, is a gift from God, and every part of it has a purpose. The boundary between clean and unclean, or waste and resource, is far more fluid in your world than in ours. The scientific basis for any of this is, of course, non-existent. In fact, applying fecal matter to an open wound is an almost guaranteed way to cause a spectacular infection, like tetanus or gangrene. Yet, people did it for centuries. Why, this is where we encounter a fascinating bit of counterintuitive biology. Some animal dung, particularly when fresh, can contain molds that produce antibiotic substances. It's a wild long shot, but it's theoretically possible that in a tiny fraction of cases, a dung poultice might have accidentally had a mild, localized antibiotic effect, similar to how penicillin was discovered from mold. This might have been just enough to reinforce the belief in its efficacy. One miraculous recovery could sustain the practice for generations. The use of these substances is a major point of discussion for medical historians. Was this a practice of the university-trained elite, or was it more of a folk remedy tradition that was simply recorded by physicians? The evidence is tricky. While these recipes appear in known texts, they often sit uncomfortably alongside the more elegant humoral theories. Some scholars argue that physicians, in an attempt to be comprehensive, simply recorded every remedy they came across, including those from rural healers. Others argue that within the complex framework of sympathies and antipathies that governed medieval pharmacology, using a lowly substance to treat a base affliction made a certain kind of sense. The debate highlights the constant tension between the formal, scholarly medicine of the universities and the practical, and often bizarre, medicine of the common people. So you endure the treatment. You lie there, smelling faintly of the fall, hoping that the powerful, natural properties of the poultice will draw out the sickness. It's a test of faith as much as a medical procedure. The line between remedy and ordeal is, as you're relearning, very thin indeed. After a few hours, the poultice is removed, and the skin is clean. Is it better? Maybe, maybe not. But you've tried one more weapon in the fight for health, even if it was the most humble and unlikely weapon imaginable. The dung poultice was unpleasant. The pot of herbal confection from the apothecary is running low, and still, you feel a lingering weakness. A deep-seated malaise that the bloodletting and the herbs haven't fully banished. Your physician, upon hearing this, might decide it's time to bring out the big guns. He prescribes a treatment that is not only powerful but also incredibly prestigious. It's a medicine of kings and nobles, an exotic and potent powder imported from the farthest reaches of the known world. It's called mummia, and it is, quite literally, powdered Egyptian mummy. You head back to the apothecary's shop, this time with a much heavier coin purse. Mummy powder is not cheap. Its journey to this small European town is a long and sordid one. It begins in the tombs of ancient Egypt, where, for centuries, tomb raiders have been plundering the sarcophagi of pharaohs, nobles, and commoners alike. They weren't just after gold and jewels, the bodies themselves had become a commodity. The mummies are stripped of their linen wrappings and broken into pieces. The dark, brittle, resin-soaked flesh and bones are packed into crates and shipped across the Mediterranean by Venetian and Genoese merchants. Part of the same trade network that brings you spices and silks. When it arrives in Europe, it's sold to apothecaries who then grind the entire thing skin, dull, desiccated muscle, and the ancient resins used in the embalming process into a fine, dark, slightly sticky powder. The apothecary takes down a special, locked box from a high shelf. He measures out a small amount of the blackish-brown powder for you. The smell is strange. A mix of dust, bitumen, and something faintly, unsettlingly organic. The belief in its power is immense. It was considered a panacea, a cure-all for a huge range of ailments. It was used to treat everything from headaches and coughs to bruises and paralysis. You might be instructed to mix it with wine and drink it, or to blend it into an ointment to be applied externally. The logic behind its use is a fantastic mess of misunderstanding and magical thinking. It started with a translation error. Natural bitumen or asphalt, the black, sticky substance that seeped from the ground in Persia, was a traditional medicine known as pis asphalt. The Persian word for this was mummia. When early Arab physicians conquered Egypt, they saw the blackened, resin-coated bodies coming out of the tombs and mistakenly thought they were preserved with this same medicinal substance. So they started calling the bodies mummia as well. Over time, the belief shifted. People thought the healing power was in the bitumen itself, but in the preserved human remains. There was also a powerful element of sympathetic magic at play. These were bodies that had defied decay for thousands of years. The thinking was that by consuming a substance that could so powerfully preserve the dead, you could transfer the preservative and healing power to your own living body. It was a medicine that promised a small piece of eternity. Of course, the trade was rife with fraud. The demand for genuine Egyptian mummy powder often outstripped the supply from actual tombs. So enterprising criminals and unscrupulous merchants created counterfeit mummies. They would take the bodies of recently executed criminals, vagrants, or hospital patients, fill them with bitumen, dry them out in the sun or an oven, and then pass them off as ancient pharaohs. The ghoulish practice became an industry. One 16th century medical writer complained bitterly that most of the mummy being sold was not from ancient Egypt at all, but was made from the stinking carcasses of the recently dead. The historical debate here is fascinating. Some historians question how many people were really fooled. Did educated physicians and apothecaries know they were sometimes buying counterfeit mummy? but turn a blind eye because the demand was so high, or was the belief in the substance so strong that any dark, powdered human remnant was considered good enough? It's a murky area, highlighting the collision of commerce, faith, and desperation. There's no evidence that the powder had any real medicinal effect, other than perhaps the psychological boost of taking the most expensive medicine money could buy. At worst, it could be toxic, depending on what the mummy was actually made of. You take your precious packet of mummy home. You mix a pinch of the dark dust into a cup of warm wine, trying not to think too hard about its origins. You are drinking history, mystery, and the essence of a long-dead person from a faraway land. It's a desperate, bizarre, and deeply medieval act of hope. As the strange, gritty liquid goes down, you pray that this ancient magic will be the thing that finally purges the sickness from your body and restores your vital humors to their proper, harmonious balance. You've been bled, leeched, poulticed with dung, and you've swallowed a dose of powdered history. It's easy to look back at all of this and see only madness and superstition, but to do that would be to miss a crucial part of the picture. Amidst all the bizarre and dangerous treatment, there was a quiet, constant, and often genuinely effective tradition of healing that ran parallel to it all: herbalism. Let's step away from the dramatic prescriptions of the physician for a moment and consider a more gentle approach. Perhaps your cough has lingered, or your digestion is still poor. You might not go back to the expensive apothecary. Instead, you might consult a local wise woman, or even just rely on the knowledge passed down in your own family, tended to in a small garden behind your house. This is the green and fragrant heart of medieval medicine. In monasteries, in castle gardens, and in humble peasant plots, people cultivated a vast array of medicinal plants. This wasn't guesswork, it was a deep and ancient body of knowledge, partly inherited from Roman authors like Diaconicus, but mostly built upon centuries of trial and error. In your garden, you might have a patch of sage. You know from your grandmother that a tea made from its leaves is excellent for a sore throat and a cough. You might grow mint, not just for flavor, but because you know it soothes an upset stomach. Chamomile flowers are gathered and dried to make a tea that helps you sleep and calms your nerves. The world around you is a living medicine cabinet, if you know how to read it. You might have a wound that, thankfully, doesn't require the barber-surgeon's hot irons. You would clean it and apply a poultice of yarrow, a common weed known as knight's milfoil because of its reputation for stopping bleeding. Or you might use a salve made from comfrey, a plant whose folk name, lipo, tells you everything you need to know about its use in helping to heal fractures and sprains. The official physicians, with their Latin texts and humoral charts, incorporated many of these herbs into their complex theories. Every plant, just like every person, was believed to have a humoral property. Rosemary was considered hot and dry, so it was prescribed for cold ailments like a phlegm cough. Violets were cool and moist, making them perfect for treating hot conditions like a fever or inflammation. A physician's herbal prescription was often a complex balancing act, combining herbs to create a perfectly tempered remedy. But here's a fascinating bit of botanical trivia that shows how this knowledge was both practical and magical. The appearance of a plant was often thought to provide a clue to its use. This was known as the doctrine of signatures. A plant with heart-shaped leaves must be good for the heart. A plant with yellow, bile-colored sap, like celandine, was used to treat liver problems and jaundice. The mottled leaves of lungwort, which were thought to resemble a diseased lung, were the go-to remedy for respiratory ailments. Eyebright, a tiny flower with a spot that looked like a pupil, was, of course, used for eye conditions. It was as if God had stamped each plant with a little label, a user's manual for humanity. Of course, some of this was pure folklore, but an astonishing number of these traditional remedies actually worked, for reasons their users could never have guessed. They knew that willow bark tea eased pain and fever. We now know that's because it contains salicin, the chemical precursor to aspirin. They knew that foxglove digitalis could treat dropsy congestive heart failure. We now know it contains powerful cardiac glycosides that regulate the heartbeat. They used moldy bread as a poultice on infected wounds. We now know that certain bread molds produce penicillin. The historical debate in this area is not about whether herbalism worked, it often did, but about the transmission of this knowledge. How much of it was preserved in learned, written texts by monks and physicians, and how much was part of a purely oral, folk tradition passed down from mother to daughter, often by women who were illiterate. The official record, written by men, often ignores or demonizes these female folk healers, sometimes labeling them as witches. But it's undeniable that they possessed a vast and practical knowledge of local botany that was essential to the day-to-day health of their communities. So you bypass the mummy powder and the peacock dung. You go into your own small garden. You pick a few sage leaves and some thyme. You crush them and steep them in hot water, inhaling the fragrant steam before you drink. It's a simple, gentle, and comforting air. It might not be as dramatic as a flebite, but as the warm, aromatic tea soothes your throat. You feel a sense of connection to a different kind of medicine, one that is quieter, greener, and in many ways, far more sensible. The herbal tea is helping. But the physician was very clear: your recovery depends on a complete rebalancing of your internal environment. This isn't just about purging bad humors or taking medicine. It's about everything you consume. Your diet is now a critical part of your prescription. Food isn't just for sustenance, it is medicine. And every single thing you eat and drink has a humoral property that can either help or hinder your recovery. You receive a detailed list of instructions, likely passed down orally from the physician to you or your cook. Since your ailment was diagnosed as an excess of hot, moist blood, your new diet will be designed to counteract this. You must now consume foods that are predominantly cold and dry. Your daily meals are about to become a lot more subtle. Gone are the rich, blood-red meats and the strong, heating red wine that you might normally enjoy. Beef and pork are off the menu. They are considered too moist and warming. Instead, you'll be eating more fish, which is classified as cold and moist, to balance its moistness. It must be prepared with drying methods, like being salted or grilled over coals rather than boiled. Chicken is acceptable, as it's considered a more neutral, balanced meat. Vegetables are a minefield of humoral properties. You'll be encouraged to eat lettuce, cucumbers, and gourds, all classic cold foods. But you must be wary of root vegetables like carrots and parsnips, which grow in the earth and are thus more earthy and prone to creating melancholy humors. Onions, garlic, and mustard are right out. They are intensely heating and would be like throwing fuel on the fire of your fever. Fruits are also categorized with meticulous care. You'll be advised to eat pears, sour apples, and pomegranates, all considered cooling. But sweet, ripe fruits like figs and grapes are to be avoided, as their sweetness is a form of heat. Lemons and other citrus fruits, being sour, are wonderfully cooling and drying, perfect for your condition. Even the way your food is cooked is part of the prescription. Roasting and frying are hot and dry cooking methods. Boiling and stewing are hot and moist. For your condition, a balance must be struck. Perhaps your fish will be lightly grilled, a dry method, and served with a squeeze of lemon, a cold ingredient. This entire system of dietary medicine is known as dietetics, and it was one of the primary pillars of Galenic medicine. A good physician was as much a dietitian as a diagnostician. He would tailor his recommendations not just to the illness, but to the patient's individual constitution, age, and even the season. A diet for a choleric young man in summer would be vastly different from a diet for a phlegmatic old woman in winter. Here's a curious detail that shows the complexity of this system: the order in which you ate your food mattered. It was believed that the stomach was like a cooking pot, and digestion was a literal cooking process. Therefore, you should start your meal with an opener or aperitif, something light and easily digestible, like a salad with a light vinaigrette, to open up the stomach. Then you would move on to the main dishes, from lighter meats to heavier ones. You would end the meal with a closer, something that would seal the top of the stomach and prevent chaw vapors from rising to the brain. This was often a bit of aged cheese or spiced, preserved fruit. The academic debate here revolves around how strictly this was followed. Were these elaborate dietary rules the exclusive domain of the super wealthy, who had private cooks and access to a wide variety of ingredients, or did these ideas trickle down to the general populace? Historians argue that even a peasant, with a limited diet of bread, pottage, and whatever vegetables they could grow, would have understood the basic principles. They might not have thought in terms of cold and dry, but they knew that on a hot day, a cool cucumber was more refreshing than a fiery onion, and that certain foods were heavy while others were light. It was an intuitive, bulk version of the same grand theory. So your life becomes a careful balancing act of flavors and properties. You chew on a piece of grilled fish, tasting its blandness. You nibble on a lettuce leaf, its watery crunch, a welcome coolness in your system. Every meal is a conscious step toward health. It's a far cry from simply taking a pill. It requires constant vigilance and a complete rethinking of your relationship with food. You are not just eating to fill your belly, you are actively composing your own internal harmony, one cooling and drying bite at a time. It's a slow, methodical, and deeply personal form of healing, guided by the ancient wisdom that insists, you are what you eat. Let's shift our focus from the grand, systemic imbalances of your humors to a much more localized and excruciatingly common problem at touch. The pain starts as a dull throb in your jaw and quickly escalates into a sharp, relentless agony that makes it impossible to eat, sleep, or think. The physician's complex dietary rules and herbal concoctions offer little relief for this kind of specific, intense pain. When it comes to teeth, the medieval world has one primary and brutal solution: extraction. You have a few options for who will perform this dreaded task. You could go back to the versatile barber-surgeon, who lists tooth pulling among his many talents, or you might seek out a dedicated tooth drawer, an itinerant specialist who travels from town to town, setting up a stall in the marketplace. These characters were part showman, part craftsman. They would often have a banner depicting piles of extracted teeth to advertise their prowess, and a musician, like a drummer, to help drown out the screams of their patients. Regardless of who you choose, the experience will be fundamentally the same. You sit on a low stool, your head tilted back. There is no anesthetic injection, no numbing gel. Your only comfort is a swig of strong wine and the grim knowledge that it will be over soon, one way or another. The practitioner leans over you, peering into your mouth. He might first try a few less invasive, and frankly, bizarre remedies. One common belief was that toothache was caused by a tiny toothworm gnawing at the root. To kill this worm, he might have you fumigate your open mouth with the smoke of burning henbane seeds. The seeds, when heated, would release tiny, wriggling black specks, the worms themselves being expelled. We now know these are just the charred embryos of the seeds, but to you, seeing these worms fall out would be powerful, visible proof that the treatment was working. If that fails, you might apply a caustic paste to the gum to kill the nerve, or even use a hot probe to cauterize the aching pulp. But these are just preliminary measures. The real work is about to begin. The tooth drawer selects his primary tool. It's not a delicate, modern-looking forceps. It's a terrifying-looking instrument called a dental pelican, named because its shape vaguely resembles a pelican's beak. It's a brutal lever and fulcrum device. One part of the tool, the fulcrum, is placed against the gum on the outside of the tooth, while a metal claw hooks around the inside of the tooth. The practitioner gets a firm grip. He doesn't pull straight up. That would be too difficult. Instead, he uses the pelican to apply immense leverage, essentially prying the tooth sideways out of its socket. The pressure is immense. You hear a sickening crack as the periodontal ligaments tear in the bone of your jaw groans in protest. It's a moment of pure, white-hot agony. The goal is to get the whole tooth out, root and all. If the crown breaks off, leaving the root behind. It's a disaster. It guarantees future pain and infection, and will require a second, even more painful attempt to dig out the fragments. And here's a weirdly specific tidbit about dental care. A whole mythology existed around how to prevent tooth itch in the first place. You might be advised to carry a charm made from a wolf's tooth. Or, a popular remedy was to rub your gums with the brain of a hare. One text suggested that to prevent future tooth decay, you should spit a frog into your mouth and then let it hop away, taking your dental problems with it. These practices fall under the umbrella of sympathetic magic, the belief that like affects like, or that an ailment can be transferred to another object or creature. The history of dentistry is a field of its own, and scholars still debate the level of skill these early practitioners possessed. While the image of the British marketplace tooth puller is popular, archaeological evidence and surviving texts show that some surgeons had a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of dental anatomy. They could distinguish between different types of teeth and had a variety of instruments for different situations. Yet, the line between a skilled extraction and a botched, jaw-breaking disaster was incredibly thin. There was no formal training, no certification. A practitioner's reputation was built entirely on word of mouth and the number of teeth on his necklace. With a final, brutal wrench, the tooth comes free. The practitioner holds it up triumphantly, a bloody trophy. Your mouth fills with the coppery taste of blood. The immediate, sharp pain of the tooth itch is gone, replaced by the deep, throbbing ache of your wounded jaw. The tooth drawer might give you a cloth to bite down on and some advice. Perhaps to rinse your mouth with wine or a salt water solution. Then he moves on to the next customer, whose groans are already starting to compete with the sound of the market day drummer. You stumble away, one tooth lighter, in immense pain, but grateful that the worm has finally been vanquished. Your troubles, however, are not confined to your mouth. As you've gotten older, you've noticed a change in your vision. The world, once sharp and clear, is becoming progressively cloudier, as if you're looking through a piece of dirty parchment. A milky white film seems to be growing over the pupil of your eye. This is a cataract, a common affliction of age in your world. It is seen as a humor or fluid descending from the brain and solidifying into a curtain behind the pupil, blocking your sight. For this, there is no herbal remedy, no dietary change. There is only one incredibly delicate and nerve-wracking procedure: couching. This is not a job for the marketplace tooth drawer or even the standard barber-surgeon. This is the work of a highly specialized itinerant surgeon, a master of the eye. Finding one is a matter of luck. They travel from city to city. Their arrival eagerly anticipated by the blind and partially sighted. You hear that one such master is in town, and you arrange a consultation. Your heart a mix of hope and terror. The procedure is deceptively simple in its description, yet requires an artist's touch. You are seated, facing the surgeon, in a well-lit area. You are told to look down and to the side. There is no anesthesia beyond. Perhaps a prayer and a strong grip on the arms of your chair. The surgeon's assistant will gently but firmly hold your head perfectly still. Any sudden movement would be catastrophic. The surgeon then takes his instrument. It is a small, sharp needle, sometimes flat like a tiny knife, sometimes round and pointed. The materials vary: bronze, silver, even gold. He approaches your eye. This is the moment of truth. He must insert the needle into the sclera, the white of your eye, at a very specific point, just a few millimeters away from the edge of the cornea. He has to slide it in horizontally, parallel to the iris, into the space behind your pupil where the clouded lens sits. You feel a sharp, alien pressure on your eyeball. Your every instinct screams at you to flinch, to pull away, but you are held fast. You must remain absolutely still. The surgeon, with a lifetime of practice in his fingertips, carefully advances till he can see it step through your pupil. Now comes the crucial maneuver. With a deft, precise flick of his wrist, he uses the tip of the needle to push down on the top of your cloudy lens. The goal is not to remove the cataract, but to dislodge it, to break the suspensory ligaments that hold it in place and push the entire lens downward, or couch it, into the bottom of the vitreous cavity of your eyeball, out of your line of sight. If he is successful, the result is instantaneous and miraculous. The cloudy obstruction that was blocking your pupil is suddenly gone. Light floods into your eye for the first time in years. The world, though blurry and unfocused since you no longer have a lens, is visible again. Colors are bright, shapes are distinct. It must feel like a genuine act of magic, a divine intervention performed by the surgeon's hand. He withdraws the needle, and your eye is bandaged, often with a compress soaked in a soothing mixture like egg-whitened rosewater. Of course, the risks were astronomical. A slight tremor, a miscalculation of depth, and the needle could puncture the lens itself, damage the iris, or cause massive internal bleeding. The risk of infection in the days following the procedure was enormous, and could easily lead to the complete loss of the eye. Couching was the ultimate high-stakes gamble. A fascinating, little-known aspect of this procedure is its ancient lineage. Couching is one of the oldest surgical procedures in the world, described in texts from ancient Babylon, India, where the Sasate Rutus Amshita gives incredibly detailed instructions, and Rome. The techniques used by your medieval surgeon were largely unchanged for over 2,000 years. It's a stunning example of medical continuity. Historians and ophthalmologists still marvel at the success rates. While many procedures must have ended in failure and blindness, a significant number clearly worked. The debate centers on the surgeons themselves. Were they charlatans who performed a dazzling trick and then quickly left town before complications set in? Or were they highly skilled specialists who understood the risks and had developed techniques to minimize them? The truth is likely that both types existed. For every hack who blinded his patients, there was likely a master who genuinely restored sight, their fame spreading far and wide. You sit in a darkened room for several days as your eye recovers, the bandage still in place. You don't know yet if you will be one of the lucky ones. Will your vision remain? Or will the darkness creep back in the form of pain and infection? You have wagered your sight on the steady hand of a stranger and his sharp needle for the chance to see the world again. It was a risk you were willing to take. Let's zoom out from your personal ailments for a moment. You've been poked, prodded, bled, and prescribed all manner of strange concoctions. You've put your faith in a system that, for all its flaws, has a logical answer for everything, from a headache to a cataract. But what happens when a disease arrives that shatters every known rule? A disease so swift, so deadly, and so utterly incomprehensible that it makes a mockery of humoral theory, astrological chart, and all the collected wisdom of Galen. What happens when the Black Death comes to your town? It starts as a rumor, a whisper from a ship just arrived in the harbor from the east. Tales of a horrifying pestilence that depopulates entire cities. At first, you dismiss it. Travelers' tales are always exaggerated. But then, the first victims appear in your own port. Healthy people suddenly struck down with a burning fever, wrecking coughs, and a terrible weakness. And then the sign appears, the horrifying, unmistakable bubo. Forward, painful swelling, often the size of an egg or an apple, appearing in the groin, the armpit, or on the neck. This is the plague sore, the token of the disease. Once it appears, death is almost certain, often within a few days. Panic grips your community. This is not a familiar sickness. It doesn't fit the neat categories of your physician. It strikes down the young and the old, the rich and the poor, the sanguine and the melancholic, with no discernible pattern. It sweeps through families, villages, and cities like a wildfire. All the established medical practices are thrown at it, and all of them fail spectacularly. Physicians are baffled and terrified. They try the old standbys. They let blood, but the patients only seem to get weaker and die faster. They prescribe cooling diets and herbs for the fever, but the disease rages on, unabated. They look to the stars for answers and see only terrifying conjunctions, like the alignment of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in 1345, which was widely blamed for corrupting the atmosphere. This explanation that the plague gives a miasma, a cloud of poisonous, pestilential air, becomes the dominant theory. So, the focus of prevention shifts from balancing the body to purifying the air. You are told to stay indoors and seal your windows. Bonfires are lit on every street corner, burning aromatic woods like pine and juniper. There's smoke intended to cleanse the toxic air. You carry a pomander, a small metal bowl filled with fragrant ambergris, musk, or spices, holding it to your nose whenever you are forced to go outside, hoping to breathe in good air instead of the corrupted miasma. Church bells are rung constantly, not just for the dead, but with the belief that the vibrations themselves could break up the poisonous air. On the plague doctors, this is the moment the iconic, terrifying figure of the plague doctor is born. Though the famous beaked mask costume is more a product of the 17th century, not the initial 14th century outbreak, still, the physicians who bravely or foolishly agree to treat plague victims take extreme precautions. They wear heavy, waxed leather gowns, gloves, and masks. They refuse to touch patients directly, examining them from a distance or with a long wooden stick. Here's a bizarre and desperate cure that was attempted, the Vickery method, also known as the chicken cure. It involved taking a live chicken, plucking the feathers from its backside, and strapping the poor bird's rear end directly onto the patient's swollen boobo. The theory was that the chicken, being a living creature, would draw the pestilence out of the body into itself. When the chicken fell ill and died, it was seen as proof that it had absorbed the poison. You would then repeat the process with a new chicken, and another, until the chicken finally survived, indicating that all the poison had been drawn out. It's a perfect, tragic example of magical thinking in the face of utter desperation. The historical debate around the Black Death isn't about what it was. Most agree it was bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, spread by fleas on rats, but about its societal impact. How did this cataclysmic event, which may have killed up to half of Europe's population, change the course of history? Some argue it shattered faith in the old institutions, the church, which could not stop the plague with prayer, and medicine, which could not stop it with phlegmate. This disillusionment, they claim, paved the way for the Renaissance and the Reformation. Others argue for more continuity, showing how old beliefs and structures proved remarkably resilient. It's a debate that continues to this day. You live in a world of constant fear. The social fabric disintegrates. People abandon their sick family members. Priests refuse to give last rites. The bodies pile up in the streets faster than they can be buried in mass graves. All the certainties of your world, all the elegant theories of medicine that once seemed so reassuring, have proven to be utterly useless against this invisible, indiscriminate tide of death. For the first time, you are truly on your own. The plague has receded, for now, leaving a shattered and emptier world in its wake. But sickness and injury are a constant part of life. Let's say you've avoided the pestilence, but you're dealing with a more mundane, yet persistent, problem. Perhaps you have a painful wart that won't go away, or a lingering fever that the physician's diet has cured. You've tried the official medicine and found it lacking. It's time to step outside the world of university-trained doctors and into the older, stranger, and sometimes more intuitive world of folk magic. You might seek out a cunning man or a wise woman. These are the local, unofficial healers. They don't have Latin books or astrological charts. Their knowledge is a tapestry woven from herbalism, tradition, and a healthy dose of what we would now call magic. The cures they offer operate on a different kind of logic, one that is less about balancing humors and more about manipulating the hidden sympathies and correspondences of the natural world. For your stubborn wart, the wise woman doesn't prescribe an ointment. Instead, she tells you to find a snail, rub it on the wart, and then impale the snail on a thorn bush. As the snail shrivels and dies on the thorn, your wart will wither and disappear. Or she might tell you to steal a piece of bacon, rub it on the wart, and then bury the bacon in the earth. As the bacon rots away secretly, so to really more. This is a classic example of sympathetic magic, specifically the principle of transference. The ailment is magically transferred from you to another object or creature. The logic is poetic, not scientific. It's about creating a connection, a secret link between your body and the natural world. Perhaps you're suffering from a fever. The cunning man might give you a small parchment charm, inscribed with a seemingly nonsensical string of words, like abracadabra, written in a triangle. You are to wear this around your neck, and as the magical words do their work, the fever will break. Or he might instruct you to go to an old oak tree at dawn, whisper your ailment to the tree, and then tie a lock of your hair to one of its branches, leaving the sickness behind. Many of these folk remedies revolve around the idea of the unbident, or things that are found, stolen, or secret. The bacon for the wart cure works better if it's stolen. A cure might require water collected from a stream that flows northward, or herbs gathered by the light of a full moon. This secrecy and special circumstance imbues the remedy with a power that ordinary, everyday objects lack. Here's a particularly strange and specific example of a folk cure for whooping cough. The patient, usually a child, would be passed under and over a donkey 3 times. The idea was that the humble, patient nature of the donkey would counteract the violent, spasmodic nature of the cough. Another cure for the same ailment involved getting a piece of bread and butter from a woman who had married a man with the same last name as her maiden name. The rarity and strangeness of the union was thought to give the food special curative properties. The line between this kind of folk healing and what the church would consider heretical witchcraft was dangerously thin. The cunning folk were often viewed with a mixture of fear and respect. They could heal your cow, but they could also, it was whispered, make it go dry. They could cure your child's fever, but they could also cast a blasting spell on your crops. Historians fiercely debate the role of these figures. Were they the last remnants of a pre-Christian pagan tradition, or were their practices simply a folk interpretation of Christian beliefs, mixed with a healthy dose of practical magic? Many charms, for instance, invoke the names of Jesus and the saints right alongside their magical incantations. They didn't see a contradiction between praying to a saint and tying a red thread around a sore wrist to them. It was all part of the same toolkit for navigating a dangerous and mysterious world. You follow the wise woman's instructions. You find a snail, perform the slightly grim ritual, and leave it on the thorn bush. You don't understand how it works, not in the way the physician explained the humors. It operates on a deeper, more primal level of belief. It's a quiet transaction with the forces of nature, and in the days that follow, as you watch the snail shrivel in the sun, you can't help but glance at your hand, watching, and waiting, and hoping that your wart is shriveling right along with it. In a world where official medicine can fail so spectacularly, this whispered, secret magic offers a different kind of hope. The magical rites of the cunning folk feel a bit too close to the edge for you, a bit too pagan. The physician's remedies are expensive and have offered little relief. There is, however, another path to healing, one that is not only respectable but is considered the most powerful of all. It is the path of faith. In your world, every illness is ultimately permitted by God, a trial for your soul or a punishment for your sins. Therefore, the ultimate cure must come from Him. It's time to turn to divine medicine. This isn't a passive act of just staying in bed and praying. It's an active, and often arduous, pursuit of healing through sacred means. Your first and most immediate option is to appeal to the saints. The celestial realm is populated with a whole host of specialized patrons. Saints who, because of the nature of their own lives or martyrdom, have patronage over specific diseases. If you have a toothache, you pray to Saint Apollonia, who had her teeth shattered during her martyrdom. For a sore throat, you turn to Saint Blaise, who miraculously saved a boy choking on a fishbone. Eye problems, you direct your prayers to Saint Lucy, whose eyes were gouged out. There is a saint for almost every conceivable ailment, from plague Saint Roch and Saint Sebastian to skin diseases Saint Anthony. You might have a small medal or a pilgrim's badge of the relevant saint, which you would press to the afflicted part of your body while you pray. But sometimes, simple prayer isn't enough. You need a more direct connection to the divine. This means seeking out a holy relic. Your local church might possess one, a splinter of the true cross, a thread from the Virgin Mary's cloak, or more commonly, a bone from a lesser-known local saint. On a saint's feast day, you might be allowed to approach the reliquary and touch or even kiss it. The belief is that the sacred power of the saint resides in their physical remains, and this power can flow into you, purging your sickness. The most potent form of faith healing, however, involves a journey, a pilgrimage. You decide that to truly show your devotion and earn your cure, you must travel to a major shrine, a place where a powerful saint is buried or where a miracle has occurred. This could be a regional center, like the tomb of Thomas Becket in Canterbury, or even an international destination like Santiago de Compostela in Spain. The journey itself is part of the cure. It is an act of penance and devotion. You walk for days or weeks, enduring hardship, sleeping in crowded pilgrim hostels, and sharing the road with thousands of others seeking their own miracles. As you get closer, the atmosphere becomes electric with anticipation. When you finally arrive at the shrine, you are one of many in a great crowd of the hopeful and the sick. You see people on crutches, people with visible sores and tumors, all pressing forward to get close to the sacred tomb or reliquary. You make your donation to the church an important part of the process, and you make your prayer. You might leave a small wax model of the afflicted part of your body, a wax arm, a wax eye, a wax heart as an offering, a tangible symbol of your plea. These are called ex-voters. Here's a fascinating and slightly strange detail of shrine culture: the incubation or temple sleep. At some shrines, it was common for the sick to spend the night sleeping on the floor of the church, as close to the relic as possible. It was believed that the saint might appear to them in a dream, either to grant them a miraculous cure on the spot or to give them instructions for a remedy, much like the ancient Greek practice of dreaming in the temples of Asclepius. The role of relics and pilgrimage in medieval society is a huge topic of study for historians. Was it pure faith? Or was there a cynical, commercial side to it? The relic trade was big business, and just like the mummy trade, it was filled with fakes. Churches vied with each other for the most prestigious relics, knowing they would attract a lucrative flow of pilgrims. Skeptics, even at the time, pointed out that there seemed to be enough splinters of the true cross to build a whole ship. The debate rages: was this the beating heart of medieval faith, or a complex system of spiritual commerce and mass psychology for you, the pilgrim? These academic questions are irrelevant. The hype is real. You leave the shrine, the long journey home ahead of you. Maybe you feel better, maybe you don't. Some cures were said to be instantaneous and miraculous. Others were gradual. But you have done something. You have taken your suffering and placed it at the feet of a power far greater than any physician. You have washed away your sins through penance and travel. Whether your body is healed or not, your soul feels lighter, and in a world where the body and soul are inextricably linked, that in itself feels like a kind of cure. Your pilgrimage is over, but your health remains fragile. You're weak, unable to work, and in need of long-term care that your family can no longer provide. The physician's advice is too expensive to follow indefinitely, and the cunning woman's charms offer little comfort for a chronic condition. There is one last place for you to go, an institution designed specifically for the sick and the destitute. You are going to a hospital, but you need to erase the modern image of a hospital from your mind. Forget the sterile corridors, the beeping machines, the teams of doctors and nurses in scrubs. A medieval hospital, or more accurately, a hospice or hospital, is a fundamentally different kind of place. It is, first and foremost, an institution of the church. It's run by monks or nuns, and its primary mission is not to cure your body, but to care for your soul. You arrive at the gate of a large, imposing stone building, often located just outside the main city walls. The institution might be dedicated to a particular saint, like the Hotel du the Hostel of God in Paris, one of the oldest and most famous. You are greeted not by a receptionist, but by a monk or a nun who assesses your case. Not everyone is admitted. These hospitals were often founded with a specific purpose. Some were for the poor and elderly, some for pilgrims, some specifically for lepers who were strictly segregated, and some for the generally sick. Once admitted, you are laid into the main ward, and it is likely just one, single, enormous room. The space is cavernous, with a high, timbered ceiling like a church nave. Down both sides of the hall are rows of beds, simple wooden frames with straw mattresses. There might be dozens, or even hundreds, of patients all in this one shared space. Men and women might be in the same ward, sometimes separated only by a simple curtain. There is no concept of privacy. You can hear the coughs, groans, and prayers of every other patient. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, incense, and sickness. Your care regimen begins. You are given a clean set of clothes, and your own clothes are taken to be washed, a notable feature of hospital hygiene. You are given food, usually simple but regular meals like bread, soup, and perhaps a little wine. This basic provision of shelter and nutrition is, for many of the poor and homeless, a significant improvement in itself. The daily routine is structured around the rhythms of monastic life. The day is punctuated by the ringing of bells for prayer. The monks or nuns who care for you will tend to your basic needs, bringing you food, helping you wash, but their main focus is your spiritual well-being. They will lead prayers, hear your confession, and ensure you are prepared for a good death, one in which your soul is right with God. Medical care, as we think of it, is secondary. A barber-surgeon might be on staff or visit periodically to perform bleeding or minor procedures. An apothecary might supply some basic herbal remedies. But there is no team of physicians doing daily rounds. The hospital is a place of care, not of cure. It is a place to rest, to be looked after, and, for many, a place to die with a measure of dignity and spiritual comfort. Here's a fascinating architectural detail of many medieval hospitals. The ward was often designed so that all the patients, from their beds, could see the altar in the hospital's chapel. In some hospitals, the chapel was at one end of the ward, in others, it was in the center. This was not an accident. It meant that even the bedridden could participate in the daily mass, the most important part of the day. Their physical healing was subordinate to their spiritual health. The historical debate surrounding these institutions is complex. Were they simply gateways to death, places where the hopeless were sent to die, or were they effective centers of social welfare and public health? Some historians argue that by concentrating the sick in one place, they may have inadvertently become breeding grounds for disease, especially during epidemics. Others argue that for their time, they were remarkably compassionate and sophisticated institutions. They provided a crucial social safety net in a world with no government-run healthcare. They were pioneers of organized nursing care, even if that care was primarily spiritual. The truth is they were both a place of immense piety and charity, and a place of immense suffering and mortality. You lie in your bed, or among many. You are no longer an individual patient with a specific, treatable ailment. You are now one of the flock, a soul in the care of the church. The focus has shifted from the frantic, often violent, interventions of medicine to a state of passive acceptance. You are fed, you are prayed for, and you wait. You watch the light shift through the high windows and listen to the murmur of Latin prayers, resigned to the fact that your fate is now, more than ever, in God's hands. Let's imagine you are suffering from a very particular and peculiar illness. It's not a fever, not a wound, not something that can be bled away or prayed for in the usual manner. You have SCR of Euler, a form of tuberculosis that affects the lymph nodes in your neck. It causes unsightly, swollen lumps and sometimes open sores. It's a persistent and disfiguring disease, and it has a very specific name in your world: the King's Evil. And it is called this for one reason: it is believed that this disease, and only this disease, can be cured by the touch of a legitimate king. This isn't a fringe folk belief. This is a formal, state-sanctioned, and highly publicized ritual. The practice of the royal touch was a powerful piece of political and religious theatre, common in both England and France for centuries. The king, as God's anointed ruler on earth, was believed to possess a divine, miraculous healing power that was passed down through his royal bloodline. So your only hope for a cure is to present yourself to the king. This is not a simple matter of knocking on the castle door. These healing ceremonies were organized events, often held on major religious holidays like Easter or Whitsun. You would have to travel to the royal court, a journey that could take weeks. Once there, you would join a long, hopeful queue of other sufferers, all with the same swollen necks, all waiting for their moment with the monarch. The ceremony itself is a grand and solemn affair. It takes place in a chapel or a great hall, filled with courtiers, bishops, and royal guards. The king, dressed in his finest robes, presides. A special church service is held, with prayers and readings that reinforce the sacred nature of kingship. The atmosphere is thick with incense, piety, and desperate hope. When the time comes, you and the other sufferers are led forward one by one. You kneel before the king. He is attended by a chaplain who reads the prayers. Then, the king performs the ritual. He gently, deliberately, touches your swollen neck with his bare hands. The touch is light, but it feels charged with an immense power, the concentrated authority of God in the state. As he touches you, he might recite a phrase like "the king touches you. God heals you, a righty touche." The ritual doesn't end there. After the touch, you are given a special coin, a touch piece or an angel, which has been blessed. It is pierced with a hole so you can wear it on a ribbon around your neck. This coin is not payment, it is a powerful amulet. You are instructed to wear it always, as it is the conduit through which the healing will continue to work. To lose the coin is to risk the return of the disease. The sheer scale of this practice is astonishing. King Louis VI of France is said to have touched someone, 600 people on a single day. English monarchs from Edward the Confessor to Queen Anne performed the ceremony. It was a hugely popular and deeply ingrained tradition. A strange and politically charged aspect of this belief was its connection to legitimacy. The ability to cure the king's evil was seen as proof of a monarch's rightful claim to the throne. Usurpers or pretenders to the throne would sometimes perform the ceremony in an attempt to bolster their legitimacy. If their touch worked, it was a sign of God's favor. It was a medical miracle that doubled as political propaganda. The historical debate here is fascinating. How do we explain the cures? SCR of EULA is a disease that can sometimes have periods of spontaneous remission. It can wax and wane on its own. It's highly likely that some sufferers who were touched by the king were simply at a point in their disease cycle where it was naturally receding. When this coincided with the royal touch, it was hailed as a miracle, reinforcing the belief for everyone else. Furthermore, the immense psychological power of the ceremony, the long journey, the grand setting, the solemn ritual, the physical contact with a figure seen as semi-divine could have produced a powerful placebo effect, making people genuinely feel better, at least for a time. Did the kings themselves believe in their power? Most probably did. It was an integral part of their identity as sacred rulers. You rise from your knees, touching the precious gold coin in your hand. The ribbon is placed around your neck. You are filled with a profound sense of awe and hope. You have been touched by the king himself, by God's chosen representative on earth. You have received a cure that is beyond the reach of any physician or herbalist. As you begin your long journey home, you finger the cool metal of the angel coin, a constant reminder of your brush with majesty and divinity. You don't know if the swellings on your neck will truly vanish, but you have been given a powerful new reason to believe they will. Now, let's imagine you are a woman in the medieval period. You have access to all the same treatments we've discussed: the bleeding, the herbs, the prayers, But you are also susceptible to a whole category of ailments that are uniquely and mysteriously female. Your biology is seen as fundamentally different from a man's colder, wetter, and governed by the strange and capricious behavior of one particular organ, the womb. If you are suffering from symptoms that a male physician can't easily explain, shortness of breath, anxiety, fainting spells, a feeling of constriction in your chest or throat, you might receive a truly bizarre diagnosis. Your doctor might inform you that you are suffering from a wandering womb or hysteria. The term hysteria itself comes from the Greek hystere, meaning uterus. The theory, inherited from the ancient Greeks, is that the womb is not a fixed organ. It is a separate, almost animal-like creature living inside your body. And if it becomes dry or light, often due to a lack of sexual activity, in the view of male physicians it can become unhappy. It might detach from its proper place in your lower abdomen and wander throughout your body in search of moisture, pressing on other organs and causing all sorts of havoc. If it wanders upward and presses on your diaphragm and lungs, it causes breathlessness and a feeling of being suffocated. If it presses on the heart, it causes anxiety and palpitations. If it reaches the throat, it can cause a choking sensation known as the globus hystericus. The treatment, therefore, is not to treat the symptoms, but to lure the wandering womb back to its rightful home. And how do you do that? By using smells. The womb, like an animal, is believed to be attracted to pleasant, fragrant aromas and repelled by foul, pungent ones. So the physician will prescribe it a pronged attack. You will be instructed to sit over a brazier burning sweet-smelling substances like incense, musk, or cassia wood. So the fragrant smoke wafts up into your nether regions, enticing the womb to come back down. At the same time, you will be made to sniff foul-smelling things, burnt feathers, castor oil, or even a piece of horn or leather set on fire. The horrible smell at your nose is meant to drive the womb downward, away from your head and chest. It's a push-pull therapy based on aromatherapy. This entire concept is, of course, a product of a medical system designed and dominated by men, attempting to explain a female body they did not understand. The symptoms of hysteria were a catch-all for what we would now recognize as a huge range of unrelated conditions, from anxiety and panic attacks to epilepsy or simple respiratory distress. A particularly strange and little-known prescription for a wandering womb involved pessaries. These were suppositories made of wool or linen, soaked in various substances and inserted into the vagina. For a wandering womb, a pessary might be soaked in something fragrant like oil of lily or rose to attract the organ downward. Conversely, for a prolapsed uterus where it had fallen too low, a pessary might be soaked in a foul-smelling substance to make it retreat back upwards into the body. The historical debate around this topic is intense and touches on the very foundations of medical history and gender studies. Was the wandering womb a genuine, if mistaken, medical diagnosis? Or was it a tool to control and dismiss women's health complaints? Scholars argue that by framing these symptoms as a uniquely female, uterine problem, it allowed a male-dominated society to pathologize female emotions and experiences. Any woman who was anxious, difficult, or simply unwell in a way that wasn't easily understood could be labeled as hysterical, her suffering attributed to the misbehavior of her own body. However, it's also important to note that most medical care for women, especially concerning childbirth and gynecology, was not performed by male physicians at all. It was the domain of female midwives. These women, while often illiterate, possessed a vast store of practical, hands-on knowledge passed down through generations. They were the true experts on the female body. They might have used their own herbal remedies and techniques that were far more effective than the physician's bizarre fumigations. Unfortunately, because their knowledge was oral and they were women, their practices were rarely recorded in the official medical texts, leaving us with a skewed, male-centric view of medieval gynecology. So you find yourself in a room, simultaneously breathing in the sweet scent of burning perfume from below and the acrid smoke of a burning feather held under your nose. It's an absurd and undignified situation. You feel torn between the authority of the learned male physician and the quiet, practical wisdom of the midwife who delivered your children. Your illness is real, but its diagnosis feels like a strange and insulting fantasy. A story told about your body by people who have never lived in one like it. Your body has been the subject of countless theories and treatments. But what about your mind? What happens if your ailment isn't a fever or a wound, but a profound and unshakable sadness, a terrifying bout of mania, or a condition where you see and hear things that others do not in the medieval world? Mental illness is a complex and deeply ambiguous category, balanced precariously between medicine, theology, and folklore. If you are suffering from what we would now call depression, your physician would likely diagnose you with an excess of melancholy. This is a classic humoral diagnosis. Black bile. The cold and dry humor associated with autumn and the earth has overwhelmed your system. It could be due to a poor diet, a certain planetary alignment, or a personal tragedy. The resulting melancholy humor is adust, or burnt, creating dark, sooty vapors that rise to your brain, clouding your thoughts and spirits. The treatments for melancholy are, therefore, perfectly logical within this framework. You need to counteract the cold and dryness. Your diet will be changed to include moistening and warming foods, things like fresh bread, chicken, and a little wine. You will be advised to take warm baths, perhaps infused with fragrant, uplifting herbs like lavender and marjoram. Music therapy might be prescribed. Listening to cheerful tunes was believed to rebalance the soul. You would be encouraged to seek out pleasant company and gentle exercise in the fresh air. In many ways, these prescriptions are remarkably humane and sound surprisingly like modern advice for mild depression. However, if your condition is more severe mania, psychosis, or what they might call frenzy, the diagnosis and treatment become much darker. A manic state might be seen as an excess of yellow bile, the hot madness, but often, severe mental illness crosses the line from a simple humoral imbalance into the realm of the demonic. Your erratic behavior, your strange utterances, your superhuman strength during a fit, these could be interpreted as signs of demonic possession. In this case, your family would not call the physician, they would call the priest. The treatment is no longer medicine, it is exorcism. You would be restrained, perhaps taken to a church, and subjected to a long and terrifying ritual of prayers, commands in Latin, and applications of holy water, all designed to drive the evil spirit from your body. There was a blurry line between these two interpretations. A physician might treat the underlying humoral cause, while the priest simultaneously treated the spiritual one. They were not always seen as mutually exclusive. And what if you were simply a danger to yourself or others? Society had to have a way to cope. You might be cared for at home if your family had the means, but if not, you could be confined. Some hospitals, like the famous Bethlehem Hospital in London, which would later give us the word bedlam, began to specialize in housing the mentally ill. Conditions were often dreadful. Patients might be chained to walls or locked in small cells, not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate need to manage behavior that was terrifying and incomprehensible. Here's a strange and little-known aspect of how society viewed the mad, the fool, or the natural was sometimes seen as having a special, almost holy status. It was believed that because their minds were not cluttered with worldly reason, they were closer to God, capable of speaking profound truths. The holy fool was a figure who could get away with criticizing the powerful, their madness providing a strange kind of immunity. This is a far cry from the chained inmate of Bedlam, and it shows the deep ambivalence of the medieval attitude toward mental illness. The historical debate on this subject is profound. When did we start medicalizing madness? Historians like Michel Foucault have argued that in the medieval period, madness was more integrated into society, a visible part of the social landscape, and that it was only later, in the age of reason, that we began to systematically confine and silence the mentally ill, treating them as objects of medical study rather than as souls in torment. Other historians argue this view is too romantic, pointing to the very real suffering and confinement that existed even in the Middle Ages. The question of whether an exorcist's ritual is any more or less humane than a physician's prescription of chains is a difficult one. So you exist in this ambiguous space. Are you sick? Or are you sinful? Is your mind afflicted by a burnt humor? Or is your soul possessed by a demon? You might be subjected to gentle dietary changes and soothing music. Or you might find yourself facing the stern commands of an exorcist. Your experience of madness is entirely dependent on how those around you choose to interpret the invisible turmoil within your own head. After all these discussions of specific ailments and treatments, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What if you could see all the potential physical threats of the medieval world on a single person? You can. There is an iconic and rather grim image that does just that: the wound man. Imagine you open a surgical textbook from the 15th century. You turn the page and you're confronted with a full-page illustration of a man. He is standing passively, his expression oddly calm. But his body is a complete catalogue of violence. He is, quite literally, a walking disaster. From the top of his head to the soles of his feet, he is being afflicted by every type of injury the medieval surgeon might expect to encounter. There's a dagger plunged into his skull. An arrow is embedded in his shoulder. A spear pierces his side. His arms and legs are being slashed by swords and axes. He has been clubbed on the head, stabbed in the stomach, and even bitten by a dog and stung by a bee. It's a gruesome sight, a summary of all the ways your body could be broken, pierced, and torn in a violent world. But this isn't a piece of horror art. It's a practical, medical diagram. It's a visual index, a table of contents for the flesh. Often, the different weapons and injuries are numbered or labeled, corresponding to specific chapters or treatments later in the book. The surgeon could look at the wound man, find the injury that matched his current patient's predicament, and then flip to the correct page to find the recommended procedure for, say, removing a barbed arrowhead from a thigh. It was a quick reference guide for trauma. The wound man tells you a lot about the realities of medieval life. The sheer variety of weapons shown: swords, lances, daggers, maces. Arrows highlights that violence was an ever-present threat. Whether from warfare, banditry, or a simple tavern brawl, the inclusion of animal bites and insect stings reminds you that the dangers weren't just man-made. The world was full of things that could hurt you. The image is also a testament to the surgeon's craft. It's a bold declaration of competence. Look, the diagram seems to say, no matter how you've been damaged, I have a cure for it. Bring me your pierced, your slashed, your bludgeoned. My book contains the knowledge to treat them all. It was a form of advertising as much as an educational tool. Here's a curious detail you might notice if you look at different versions of the wound man from various manuscripts. Sometimes, the placement and type of injuries change based on the specific experiences of the surgeon or the region. A textbook from a region known for its wars against mounted knights might feature more lance wounds. A manual from a city plagued by street crime might show more dagger stabs. The wound man was not a static image. It evolved to reflect the specific dangers of its time and place. The historical debate around the wound man is about its purpose and interpretation. Was it purely a practical tool for surgeons, a kind of anatomical cheat sheet, or did it also serve a mnemonic purpose, helping students memorize the different types of wounds and their treatments through a single, powerful image? Some scholars also see a deeper, more philosophical meaning in it. The wound man, standing stoically amidst a storm of violence, can be seen as a symbol of human suffering, an everyman bearing the pains of a fallen world. He is a medical version of Job or the suffering Christ, a figure who endures all possible afflictions. This interpretation connects the practical world of surgery with the deeper religious and cultural anxieties of the age. As you gaze at this strange and compelling figure, you see your own vulnerability reflected back at you. Every one of those injuries is a possibility. You have worried about your humors and your soul. But this image is a stark reminder of the brute physical dangers that lurk outside your door. It's a world where a simple argument can end with a knife in the gut, and where a surgeon's skill is measured by his ability to patch up a body that has been systematically dismantled. The wound man doesn't show any internal diseases, no signs of plague or fever. His afflictions are all external, violent, and sudden. Here's a map of misfortune, a silent testament to the fragility of the human body in a hard-edged world. You've seen the physician who diagnoses from a distance, and the surgeon who patches up the visible damage catalogued by the wound man. But there's a fundamental piece of the puzzle missing from their understanding. They know about the four humors, the influence of the stars, and the proper way to stitch a wound. But what does the inside of the human body actually look like for most of the medieval period? The answer was nobody really knew. The systematic dissection of human cadavers for the purpose of medical study was, for centuries, the powerful taboo. The Christian tradition emphasized the sanctity of the body and the importance of its integrity for the eventual resurrection. To cut up a human corpse was seen as an act of profound disrespect, even desecration. Physicians and surgeons had to rely on the anatomical knowledge passed down from the ancient world, primarily from the Roman physician Galen. The problem was, Galen's anatomy was wrong. He lived in a time and place where human dissection was also forbidden, so most of his knowledge came from dissecting animals, pigs, goats, and, most famously, Barbary apes, which he believed were the closest analog to humans. So the human liver with 5 lobes that your physician learned about at university, that's a pig's liver. The human jawbone that was thought to be to separate pieces, that's from an ape, for over 1,000 years. European medicine was based on a flawed, animal-centric map of the human body. But slowly, tentatively, things began to change. Starting in the late 13th and early 14th centuries, primarily in the medical schools of northern Italy like Bologna and Padua, a new and revolutionary practice began: the public anatomy lesson. Imagine you are a medical student at one of these pioneering universities. You file into a specially built hospital theater. It's a steep, circular or octagonal room, with rows of tiered balconies rising up around a central table. The areas called dissections were usually done in winter to slow decomposition and filled with the scent of preservatives on death. The scene at the center of the room is a strange and rigid hierarchy. On the floor below stands the body of an executed criminal, the only source of legally sanctioned cadavers. Beside it, on a low stool, sits a humble barber-surgeon, the sector, holding the knives. He is the manual laborer in this scene. On a raised platform above him stands the professor of medicine, the lector. He is dressed in his full academic robes and holds no tools. He does not touch the body. Instead, he reads aloud from a classical text, usually a book by Galen or one of his Arabic commentators like Avicenna. And somewhere between the two, there is often a third figure, the ostenser, or demonstrator, who holds a long wooden pointer. As the lector reads a passage, the liver has 5 lobes. The ostenser points to the corresponding area on the body. The surgeon then cuts. The entire procedure is not an investigation. It is a demonstration. Its purpose is not to discover something new, but to prove that the ancient text is correct. This led to some bizarre and frustrating moments. When the surgeon would cut open the abdomen and find a liver with only 2 main lobes, not 5, what would happen often? The professor would conclude not that Galen was wrong, but that the corpse was deformed, or that human anatomy had somehow changed since ancient times. The authority of the written word was so powerful, it could literally override the evidence of their own eyes. This is a major point of debate for historians of science. Was this early dissection a true scientific revolution, or was it just a new, more elaborate form of scholasticism? More concerned with venerating old texts than with discovery, the answer is probably both. It was a transitional phase. A little-known fact about these public dissections is that they were major social events. They were open not just to medical students, but to other faculty, city officials, and curious members of the public who could get a ticket. They were a form of theater, a dramatic public confrontation with human mortality. But within this rigid system, a quiet revolution was starting. A few brave individuals began to trust their own eyes more than the ancient texts. The most famous of these was Andreas Vesalius, a 16th century Flemish anatomist. He broke with tradition. He got off his high chair, took the knife from the surgeon's hand, and performed the dissections himself. He meticulously charted what he actually saw, not what Galen said should be there. His groundbreaking 1543 book, De Humani Corporis Fabricae, on the fabric of the human body, with its stunningly detailed and accurate illustrations, was a direct challenge to a millennium of medical dogma. It was the beginning of the end for Galen's authority and the dawn of modern, observational anatomy. You, as a student, stand on the balcony of the anatomical theatre, breathing in the cold, acrid air. You listen to the professor's droning Latin and watch the surgeon's knife. You are caught between two worlds, the ancient world of infallible texts and the new, messy, and undeniable reality of the human body laid bare on the table before you. A quiet, bloody revolution is beginning, one that will eventually tear down the entire theoretical edifice of medieval medicine. We've traveled a long, strange road together on this journey. You've had your humors diagnosed by a physician who wouldn't touch you, your blood-led barber who also cuts hair, and your head drilled by a surgeon to let out bad vapors. You swallowed powdered mummy, worn dung poultices, and sought healing from the touch of a king. No, as our journey comes to a close, you find yourself standing at the threshold of a new era, with the first whispers of modern anatomy in the air. It's time to look back and try to make sense of it all. How could people believe in these things? How could they submit to such painful, bizarre, and often counterproductive treatments? It's easy for us, with our 21st century knowledge of germ theory, antibiotics, and sterile surgery, to look back and dismiss it all as ignorant superstition. But to do so is to miss the most important point. The medical system of the Middle Ages, for all its flaws, was not random or chaotic. It was a complete, coherent, and, in its own way, deeply logical system of thought. The theory of the four humors was an elegant and comprehensive explanation for the mysteries of human health. It connected your body to the entire universe, linking your personal well-being to the seasons, the elements, and the stars. It provided a satisfying answer for every question, a reason for every ailment, and a corresponding cure for every imbalance. When you were sick, you weren't just a collection of random symptoms, you were a finely tuned instrument that had fallen out of harmony with the cosmos. And every treatment, from bloodletting to dietary changes, was designed with the single, rational goal of restoring that harmony. The cures that seem most absurd to us often had a powerful psychological component. Imagine the immense placebo effect of a ritual like the royal touch. The long, arduous journey, the solemn ceremony, the physical contact with a semi-divine figure. It was a profoundly powerful experience that could convince a sufferer they were healed. And that conviction itself is a form of healing. Swallowing expensive, exotic mummy powder was just a medical act. It was a status symbol, a way of showing you could afford the very best, most powerful medicine known to man. We also have to remember the lack of alternatives. In a world without painkillers, the speed of a surgeon was more valuable than his precision. In a world without antibiotics, the belief that laudable pus was a sign of healing was a comforting lie that gave structure to a terrifyingly unpredictable recovery process. When faced with the incomprehensible horror of the Black Death, was it so irrational to believe it was a poisonous miasma and to try and purify the air with bonfires? They were using the best knowledge and tools they had to fight an enemy they couldn't see or understand. The historical debate that encapsulates this entire era is one of progress versus perspective. Is the history of medicine a triumphant, linear march from ignorance to enlightenment, or is it more useful to view each historical period on its own terms, to understand its beliefs and practices within their own context, without judging them by our modern standards? This is the challenge of a Whig history approach. While it's tempting to just celebrate Vesalius for correcting Galen, it's perhaps more insightful to understand why Galen's ideas were so powerful and persistent for over 300 years. They offered us stability and comprehensive answers that a new, uncertain science couldn't yet provide. As you look back on your journey, you realize you weren't a fool for trusting your physician. You were a product of your time, operating within a system of belief that was as real and solid to you as germ theory is to us. You put your faith in a complex web of tradition, observation, and spirituality. You sought balance in a world that felt chaotic, and meaning in suffering that felt random. The potions may have been strange and the procedures brutal, but the fundamental human desire behind them is timeless, the desperate, hopeful, and unending quest to be well. And so, the great book of the past gently closes. The echoes of our journey begin to fade now, softening at the edges. The stern voice of the physician, reciting his Latin texts and humoral theories, becomes a distant, rhythmic murmur. Like rain on a faraway roof, the sharp, metallic scent of the surgeon's tools, the acrid smoke of the cauterizing iron, all of it dissolves, replaced by the clean, gentle fragrance of your own familiar room, the rustle of old parchment, the clink of the apothecary's jars, the distant, solemn chanting from a chapel. These sounds are no longer sharp and clear, but are woven into the soft background hum of your own quiet space, becoming part of the fabric of a dream. The world of humors and stars, of leeches and lancets, of desperate prayers and bizarre prescriptions, releases its hold on you. You are no longer a patient on a rough straw mattress, anxiously awaiting a diagnosis from your urine. You are no longer a pilgrim on a dusty, endless road, hoping for a miracle. The story is told. The trials are over. You are simply here, safe and sound in the quiet comfort of your own bed. Feel the gentle weight of the blanket around you. A warm and reassuring anchor in the calm sea of the present moment. Let the vivid details of the past drift away like smoke from a snuffed-out candle, leaving only a profound sense of stillness in their wake. Let the darkness behind your eyes be a soft, velvet curtain, closing at last upon the stage of history. There are no more diagnoses to fear, no more remedies to endure. There is only rest, deep, quiet, and well-earned rest, as you float peacefully now, drifting ever so gently toward the soft and welcoming shores of sleep. The end of the article. Good night.